Hello and welcome. This is going to be the first installment of a four-part series on Hobbes' masterpiece, the Leviathan. In this video, I will be talking about Hobbes' formulations on human nature, as well as the state of nature. It is important to begin our inquisition into the Leviathan by asking, why is it so important to talk about human nature? For Hobbes, human nature is at the core of his political philosophy. While other philosophers, like Aristotle, might conclude that man is the political animal, Hobbes believes that a polity can only be formed with some form of coercion. That is to say, human beings do not naturally form political associations. This is important, as we will see later on in his philosophy, because it helps guide his general vision about mankind. It is also worthwhile to note that the Leviathan begins with an attempt to reconstruct a human being in the most literal sense. Hobbes explains how, because we have eyes we can see, a nose so we can smell, a mouth so we can taste, and so on. This is crucially important in the Hobbesian philosophy because it gets to the core of what he's saying, that we are all creatures of sense. Hobbes doesn't just ramble on about seemingly random things for no reason. It helps illustrate a greater point. By building on such fundamental truths, Hobbes is able to provide validity to his theory. Because we are all creatures of sense, we must therefore develop what Hobbes calls, quote, appetites and aversions. This is fairly intuitive for any human being because we instinctively know what we like and don't like, as guided by our senses. Hobbes believes that human beings are always in motion, in search of appetites and in avoidance of aversions. To be human is to be motivated by these appetites and aversions. Therefore, it is crucially important in the Hobbesian philosophy that such appetites and aversions exist, and it is the premise upon which Hobbes bases his arguments on. For if we are not motivated by such things, conflict may not occur at all. As we have seen throughout history, the real world provides two challenges to the Hobbesian man that will lead to the perpetual conflict that we see in the state of nature. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, the state of nature essentially means what society will look like in the absence of government, culture, and essentially civilization. There are many different interpretations of how such a state of nature might look like. However, for the purposes of this video, we are only going to explore the Hobbesian state of nature. For Hobbes, life in the state of nature is nasty, brutish, and short, characterized by constant violence and a great deal of human suffering. There are two main reasons why the state of nature is so bleak in Hobbes' point of view. First, the world would be perfectly peaceful if there was only one person in it. This person would be unhindered in the pursuit of happiness, or, as Hobbes calls it, felicity. The real world, however, is comprised of many individuals, each with their own appetites and aversions that are different to their neighbors. Because there's a limited amount of goods that belong to felicity, conflict arises. What Hobbes basically explains here is the basic economic problem. Unlimited wants and desires, but a limited amount of goods. By searching for these goods, each man will get in the way of his neighbor, and so on and so forth, which leads to conflict. Second, even in the absence of scarcity, conflict among mankind would still occur because, unlike the bees, an example Hobbes provides in the Leviathan, the individual good differs drastically from the common good. By furthering your own interest, say, acquire more land, you are taking away resources from the rest of the population. Because of these two factors, mankind will not naturally become peaceful. Hobbes also spells out many reasons why perpetual conflict is likely. According to Hobbes, the three main causes of conflict are competition, glory, and diffidence. Competition is conflict inspired by the pursuit of material gain. Glory is conflict inspired by the desire to protect or advance one's reputation. Diffidence is conflict inspired by the pursuit of safety, and it is the most important cause of conflict for two main reasons. First, it capitalizes on a deep insecurity individuals have in the state of nature towards their neighbors. The very existence of other people poses a severe threat on one's livelihood because without an overarching authority to protect you, individuals are relatively equal in their ability to conquer their neighbors. This is because no matter how formidable one man is, their human nature compels them to sleep, and that makes them vulnerable. This is a quite obvious but often overlooked point, and especially when we contextualize Hobbes, we will see why. Unlike today, where we have modern surveillance technology and a reliable and trained police force, Hobbesian times do not offer such luxuries. Even the extremely rich are vulnerable to attack just like the rest of us, which explains all the cool castles and guards. Moreover, the most successful man will have the most enemies because individuals will pursue the easiest path to felicity. Notice the extremely coherent logic Hobbes employs. The quickest way from A to B is to draw a straight line between them, and the easiest way to gain felicity or material goods is not to do it yourself, but to rob it from other people. If a man builds a house with a cultivated garden, it is much easier to take it by force than to build it yourself, an example that Hobbes uses in the book. Since felicity is other referential, it is also therefore unending, and that is what makes part of the perpetual conflict argument likely. Second, and most importantly, in the state of nature, every individual has what's called, quote, the right of nature. This is extremely dangerous because it entitles individuals to interpret for themselves the appropriate means to attain self-preservation. Essentially, this justifies a limitless range of actions that individuals can pursue, including but not limited to hurting other people, all in the name of saving themselves. Hobbes believes that the right of nature is extremely self-evident because, as God created creatures, we therefore have the ability and the right to protect ourselves from the violent nature that characterizes our world. The more important aspect to this claim is that although we all have the right of nature, the extent to which each individual is willing to go through with it or interpret it to their personal understandings is dramatically different. One person may fully exercise the right of nature by initiating a bunch of preemptive attacks on their neighbors, while the other person may sit peacefully at home. The problem is, we have no systematic way of figuring out who's going to use the rights of nature to attack other people and who is not going to do so, and therefore it is only logical to assume the worst case scenario for every individual there to maximize the possibility of your own survival. Only by treating your neighbors as a potential intruder or someone who is likely to kill you can you truly be safe. This bleak outlook on human nature is certainly colored by Hobbes' personal experiences. During his lifetime, he has gone through perhaps one of the bloodiest conflicts in English history, the English Civil War. This resulted in tens of thousands of casualties on both sides of the aisle and lasted years on end, reducing England to a version of the Hobbesian state of nature where there was constant conflict, starvation, and constant human suffering. This was everything Hobbes was against and wished to avoid in writing the Leviathan. We will explain how establishing a sovereign is going to help individuals escape the state of nature in the next episode. Together, These factors lead to perpetual conflict in the state of nature if left alone. Before we continue the exploration into Hobbes' theory, it is important to stress that Hobbes' philosophy is extremely complicated and extremely specific. Therefore, it is often very easy to misinterpret Hobbes. One of the most common misinterpretations is that Hobbes believes humans are slaves to their passions. While this may seem like what Hobbes is getting at, there are two deeper elements to this claim. First, Hobbes believes that unlike animals, humans have the ability to use reason. Reason has the ability to liberate us from the state of nature because it allows us to see how capitulation to a sovereign may increase our chances of survival. Second, and even more profoundly, Hobbes recognizes that not all of us are reasonable. Therefore, Hobbes pragmatically suggests that, quote, the passion to be reckoned on is fear. Here, we see again how Hobbes is able to use his deep understanding of human nature to suggest a way out of the state of nature. It is alright to him that not every individual is rational enough to see that without a sovereign there will be continued bloodshed. All that matters is that every individual submits to the sovereign, no matter how. Fear is a tool for submission. By cleverly exploiting human nature to an end goal, Hobbes believes that we can reach a state of peace. I hope this example shows you the level of nuance that Hobbes encapsulates in his writings. By having a deep understanding of human nature, Hobbes is able to construct one of the most elegant political theories I have ever seen. In the next video, I will go on to explain how establishing an absolute sovereign can help individuals escape the state of nature. Now, I will offer you some practical advice for anyone that is blessed with the opportunity to write an essay on this book. Hi. I got tired of recording my voice over a PowerPoint presentation, so for this part of the video, you get to see my face. Now, I will mainly be talking about one point for the end of this video because I feel that for every end of the video, I can have a different point. Now for this video, I will mainly be focusing on sharpening your analytical skills during your essay writing process. Now, the number one most important thing, in my opinion, when it comes to writing an academic essay of this sort, is to ask yourself the question, why is it so crucially important that this is crucially important? Now, I know that might sound very convoluted and kind of confusing, and you might be asking me, what the hell are you talking about? You would be exactly in the right state of mind if you're asking me these questions, because when I first heard this advice, it was confusing to me too. But essentially what this means is justifying your points on the second degree. So let me illustrate this through an example. Say you're talking about the Leviathan, and you're talking about why the right of nature is really important in creating the state of nature that Hobbes describes. Now, how would we apply what I just said? The way you apply it is in the following terms. So, in your essay, you might be tempted to say, okay, the right of nature is a really, really important aspect of the state of nature because it allows people to keep on doing these, preemptive attacks, right? This is because you never know the extent to which other people would exercise their right of nature, and therefore the only way you can truly feel safe and secure is by preemptively attacking your neighbors, right? So when I preemptively attack my neighbor, I feel safe because then I know that that person will not exercise their right to nature and attack me, and so on and so forth, therefore alleviating you of the insecurity. Now, that is a very, very good first order explanation, but now you have to justify why this is so crucially important, that this is crucially important. If that makes sense, essentially what you're trying to do is trying to justify your point and why you put that there. So, what this looks like is this. So you write about how the right of nature is really, really important by saying the right of nature is important because blah, 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 right? As we've explained. But the second order explanation is really even more important because it is the only chance for you to write an evaluative comment. And when I say evaluative comment, I don't necessarily mean, saying, weighing up things, but rather evaluating from Hobbes's point of view. So what I mean by that is, because if you're writing an analytical piece on the Leviathan, the examiner, the person reading your script, is wanting to know how well you understand Hobbes. So by having this second order explanation, not only have you already explained in the previous analysis that you understand Hobbes's argument, you're also explaining how you understand how he thinks about his own arguments. So what arguments he thinks are more important than the others, and so on and so forth. So in this example, in the right of nature, you can say, okay, Hobbes thinks this is really, really important because of the following reasons, but also why is this more important in the grand scheme of his theory is because everyone is entitled to it, and this is something that is a God-given right to all individuals, right? And therefore you can't take it away from them without some force, and that is the core of his argument, right? It's the implementation of the Leviathan, and this is a very powerful argument in favor of implementing the Leviathan, because only when you have the Leviathan present, or the government, or the state, I guess, then can you make sure that everyone's right of nature is unanimous, and therefore we alleviate the thing that causes or is most likely to cause the most conflict, and we make sure that this is eradicated in the future. So I hope that makes sense to you. I know it's kind of confusing, and if you have any questions, please just type it up and I'll try to answer as best as I can. This is me signing off. Bye.